let me say a few words today. I want to share some thoughts about creativity, because that's one of the things that everybody talks about. And the claim is that we don't breed creativity in our institutions and so on. And then I'll talk about way creativity is described in terms of discovery, invention, and innovation. And we'll talk about this innovation that Balrojo has done, and he has done others. He's basically an innovator. And I'll share some thoughts on that. And I'll also share a few thoughts on education, the purpose of education, which I think is often misconstrued. But let me start off with creativity. We have a reasonable understanding of creativity now. I'd like to tell you a little bit about how we understand it in terms of what are called the split brain experiments that were done by Sperry and co-workers. Sperry got his Nobel Prize in 1981. He was a neurosurgeon. And they worked with a large number of patients who had damage to one brain or the other, the left or the right brain. And while they were good, responsible surgeons, they also studied the effects of this. They came to the following conclusion. I'm making an oversimplification of the thing. There are basically 4 steps in creativity. The first step is data gathering by the left brain. In drawing a parallel to this product, he's gathering data through his questionnaire. They're collecting all this information. And after you collect all the information with the right brain, you then ask, your left brain asks the question, how do I make sense out of all this diverse data that I've collected? And that's called the incubation period. And the third step is called the enlightenment period, when the right brain thinks it has an idea that unifies everything that you have seen, that everything fits into a certain model. Of course, the enlightenment is often wrong. I mean, for students, this enlightenment occurs when you study for the exam at 1 o'clock at night, because that's when you first study the whole subject, and then suddenly you think, this is falling into place. Unfortunately, this whole picture breaks down when you enter the hall at 9 for the exam, and then you panic a bit, and then you calm down again. It happens to everybody. You look around, everybody is sweating, then you start getting to brass tacks. But the point is that there is an enlightenment step when the right brain tends to make a picture that explains all the data. The last step is called experimental verification, which, because your right brain model could be wrong, it's important that you always have an experiment by which you test it out. In this case, he tests it out on a large number of pilot. He has a pilot study in which he gives it to 500 people. He didn't tell you that he gave it to other people before and corrected it. He must have gone through such steps. So that's the experimental verification. In social sciences, you do it by questionnaire, because the social sciences are often more difficult than the natural sciences. In the natural sciences, the laws are well understood. The fundamental laws are extremely well understood. In the social sciences, it's often the consensus of current social opinion that forms the basis. The rest of the arguments, the logical conclusions, the leaps and all that are common to both science, both natural sciences and social sciences. Now let me get back a bit and explain that the left brain, basically we understand, is logical, is good with step-by-step reasoning, and it's good with words. The right brain, on the other hand, is musical, it's imaginative, and it's not logical at all. It's actually illiterate. But in actual practice, if your right brain is damaged, then the left brain, there is a redundancy by which the left brain learns to do the job of the right brain. So in spite of damage to one part of the brain, you don't lose these facilities, but you have to relearn them. But having said this, one of the problems is that university education, there are 2-3 issues that I want to flag before you. The first is university education emphasizes logic, just not here, everywhere, all over the world. And because unless I understand something logically, I can't go to class and explain it to you. If only my right brain understands it, I'll have to just stand there and wave my hands and say, you know, and I won't get anywhere, because you just have to, you're doing it completely by an imaginative process, and you don't know how it happens. So all of university education is about the left brain. What we can do is, hopefully each of us has a right brain and we have our abilities, hopefully we can nurture it a bit. And I don't really know, all of us are foxed about how to nurture it. I have tried one experiment and I can tell you I didn't succeed, but I'll still tell you the experiment. I asked our students who took my thermodynamics course, I said, if a problem is complicated, you still have you can guess at the answer. And I say, that's your right brain acting. So please guess and write the answer. And then work out the problem logically with your left brain, and then see if the two match. Our students typically will write that right brain answer in pencil, work out the answer correctly in pen. If it doesn't agree, they'll erase it and write this answer there. The idea is not to see if the two answers match. The idea is if your intuition matches a logical conclusion that you reach, then you get self-confidence. So the idea is to tune your intuition, tune your right brain so that the logical result comes out to be the same as what you guess. I mean, I keep saying this, a good cricket player doesn't start asking, he doesn't apply Newton's laws to the bowler's action and say, where does the ball go, how fast will it come, where will it move, and then hit the ball. By the time he'd have been bowled. So the whole idea is you do it with your spinal cord, and the question is my spinal cord right? You do videos of the thing and look at it and then ask, was my spinal cord right? And then you feed back the system, give feedback to the system, and then you correct yourself. So the whole idea is that the university will continue to nurture only your logical thinking, but you have to nurture your right brain. Keep guessing answers all the time, however complex the situation may be. Then let me also tell you, creativity, we describe creativity in terms of discovery, in terms of invention, in terms of innovation. Education itself has three components: a knowledge component, in which you relate what you learn to what you know; a know-how component, where you learn how to apply knowledge in an organized fashion to produce a service or a good; and then a character component, because we can talk continuously about the character component. As we get older, we see its importance more and more. But as we get older, the students will listen to us less and less if we talk to them about character, so I won't talk to you about character today. But it is, in the long run, we find that it's far too important to ignore. But let me come back to the discovery and invention usually relate to the knowledge component of education. Progress occurs through discovery and invention, and they're both about creating new things. On the other hand, know-how actually improves by innovation. Innovation not only has a component of novelty in it, it also has an economic component to it. Otherwise, it's not called innovation. It's often not about really new things as a novel way of understanding an old idea. Or it's also about essentially thinking by analogy. If you find something has worked very well in one field, can you carry it over to another? And I must tell you, education, fundamentally, education is about refinement of the mind. It is not about jobs. Unfortunately, the two have been tied up. If you ask 90% of the people who go into the job what part of formal education they use in their regular job, you will find hardly anything, except teachers. I mean, who naturally learn the subject, go back, teach it, so they'll use a lot of it. So it's not as if education is irrelevant, but education is about refining your mind. It's about training your mind to think. And with that basic knowledge and self-confidence, then you go and learn the job. Your learning is mostly on the job. So I think the purpose of education is not to train you for a job, because we don't even know where you're going. In the university particularly, I have a class of 60 and I don't know where each person is going, and I can't be training them for one specific purpose. So the whole purpose of education is to find unity in knowledge. This is a Renaissance concept actually. We also had that earlier in India. But the Renaissance concept very clearly says there is, maybe I should tell you what the three premises on which the university is based. The premises are, the first premise is that the material world is lawful. That means other than human beings, everything else, all objects obey laws. That means there exist laws. You may not know the laws, but there exist laws that explain the behavior of the material things. The second is that this unity in the diversity of behavior of material things, the unity is the law that unites everything, can be discovered by a combined study of natural sciences and social sciences. Natural sciences means maths, physics, chemistry, engineering, everything. Social sciences includes humanities, all the subjects that are basically supposed to be right brain oriented. But you need a combination of these. That's the second premise. The third premise is education leads to indefinite progress of human beings. It's just faith. If you don't have these three faiths, you shouldn't be in an educational system. But basically, that's what the education system is based on. But the whole purpose, the reason I mention this is because the industry looks at life very differently. They look at differences. The industry will always ask you, how is my product different from somebody else's product? It's called unique selling proposition, I think, in management parlance. In fact, somebody asked me when I was director here, what is IIT's unique selling proposition? And I said, my USP is that I don't have a USP. It's a fact. I'm not looking for anything unique. I'm looking for unity. I'm like looking to see if everything around me can be explained in terms of certain basic principles. What are the minimum principles with which I can explain everything? I think the whole point is that you're looking at ideas that can spill over from one field to another. And one of the ways of promoting this innovation, and incidentally, the greatest innovator is supposed to have been Thomas Alva Edison. In a period of 1.5 years, he produced 400 patents. I think that's a record that's still to be beaten in Menlo Park. So he's called the Wizard of Menlo Park. But the point about innovation is, it is something that people have increasingly realized that while you can't do much about discovery and invention, to produce discoverers and inventors, you can't do very much. All you do is hire the best brains, give them very good conditions of work, and pray. If you're the director, you pray, because sometimes they retire without doing anything. But because they are such brains, you have to take that chance. But that's all you can do. And in terms of innovation, you can do something different. You can bring unlike minds together. You can bring them together and make sure they meet, they talk, and so on. And out of that, you hope a spark will come, and very often sparks have come. It's called the idea factory approach. Bell Labs used it in the beginning. In fact, they're now what's called solid state division. Once upon a time had a mix of people from mathematics, physics, chemistry, humanities, and they had engineers, they had electrical engineers, chemical engineers, and so on. And they had one of the most productive periods in the 40s. And they haven't been quite as productive afterwards, because they called themselves a solid state division, and then there was a visa for entry. Before that, there was no visa for entry. You could be any graduate, and if you were bright, they would take them. They hired these people, gave them excellent working conditions. They structured interactions. That was important. They also had, I must tell you, a very good canteen, because everybody gravitated to the canteen. They met there. And while we often think we think with our heads, we often don't realize that we actually think with our stomachs. So if you have a good canteen that brings people together, and people relax over good food, and then they share ideas. So this idea factory approach is also an important thing, which is what a place like IIT does in a sense. It brings you people from different disciplines together. We have created the research park. We have deliberately created a park where we wanted people with different attitudes to come together. I mean, a professor who knows the subject well, but I must warn you that if you get a PhD and you're called a professor, there's already a penalty you pay, because you're supposed to be clever, you're supposed to be good at this subject. So you can't, any thought that comes to you spontaneously, watch out, check it if it's right before you say anything. Whereas the student has the advantage of not being labeled. So he can say anything and he'll be wrong 99 times, but the 100th time he'll be so right that he would beat the prof in the long run. So you need the student also, and you need a industry person who can tell you how the idea can be sold in the marketplace. So you need this combination, and you need these three people together. You need a good canteen in the research park, and it's actually worked. We have produced, in the first year itself, I think we produced some 60 patents, whereas on an average we get about 5 patents a year. And mind you, 5 is very high, because in 2004 the Ministry of Commerce called me and said, I was director here, and the secretary called me and said, Professor Ananth, you should come to Delhi. We are going to award you the prize for the maximum number of patents by any university in India. I said, there must be some mistake. We have only 5. He says, others have less. So I think it's a matter of, you're creating the conditions for this. And we created the research park. In the very first year, we had 50. We have even more now. We have a large number of students going there. But we really think that you need this good education, sound education, because the only advantage human beings have had over all other animals is their ability to accumulate knowledge and pass it on to the next generation. The only way you can do it is through formal education. I know in education we are often out of phase. It is just when you want to learn, we don't want to lecture. You want to learn at 12 at night, and I don't feel like lecturing at 12 at night. I want to lecture early in the morning and go back home. And 8 or 9 is the worst time for students. They don't seem to be receptive at all. Otherwise, we have classes at 1 o'clock, which is even worse. They don't want to come. So we have a problem of education being always out of phase. But the big advantage is, while I used to tell this to my colleagues, I said, if students aren't attentive in class, don't bother too much, because their left brain is anyway collecting the data. And I'll tell you proof of that. Very often you don't listen in class, but at the time of the exam, you suddenly say, oh, that's what the guy was going on and on about. Because your left brain was collecting the data. Somewhere you knew that he was saying that. And this is what happened. So you have this data gathering, and this data gathering can occur in diverse situations. So if you have a sports fest, if you have a cultural fest, you also have serious classes. could be any idea. Similarly, this business of finding your career, I must also say, I have a small quarrel with what Nagarajan said, so I'll share that with you. In the sense that he said parents do influence. I mean, I agree with him in that. But let me give you a cultural difference. And we've been brainwashed by the West to think that we should give even more independence to youngsters. But let me also, while part of it is right, I mean, there's a middle path. We have an MTech program jointly with Germany, and some of our students go there doing thesis work. And as soon as I became director, this is a practice in Germany because we have a tie-up with them. They'll take the director around 6 universities in 5 days. I think it's also a test of whether the director has enough stamina and so on. But they take you around, and I went to University of Berlin, and there was a professor of mechanical engineering who came and said, "Oh, you're from IIT, you're the director of IIT, you know, you sent this MTech student to me." I said, "I know." He even said the name. He said, "Oh, I'm surprised you know the name." But he said, "You know, you sent a boy to me, I made a man out of him." I said, "What's the rush?" he said, "What do you mean?" I said, this is a cultural difference. We in India, you know, we interfere with our kids till they are 35, and then finally they throw us out, and then we stop interfering. You do the opposite. You're waiting for him to be 15 and then declare the child an adult and absolve yourself of all responsibility of looking after the child, because you're looking at your career afterwards also. So it's simply a culturally different way of looking at things. I said, anyway, he's going to live to be 80, so he can be an adult for 45 years, for 35 years, let him be a kid. How does it matter? He said, "Gee, I never thought of it that way." But it's simply a different cultural thing. But I think the important point is, like, I agree with Nagarajan, a lot of the time your parents may be right. But on the other hand, when it doesn't strike you as right, you must be able to argue with them, and you must be able to come to some conclusions. A questionnaire like this will certainly will provoke thought. I think that's the biggest advantage. After the questionnaire gives you wrong answers, you have to go and ask yourself, did you answer the question honestly? Because that's also an important thing. Very often, when you are young, you tend to give the answers that are supposed to be right. You know, when you're older, you face the truth a little more squarely. And finally, in defense of older people, I'll just leave with a story. This has actually happened in Kruger National Park. You know what, 15, 20 years ago, they had an excess of elephants. So they decided culling was required. If you cull, you have to kill the oldest. So they killed all the oldest elephants. And after 2 years, they had a mysterious death of rhinos. They didn't know what was happening. Then it turned out bull elephants were killing rhinos. So they puzzled about this for a long time, and then finally brought old elephants from another park to Kruger. And after 1 year, the killing stopped, because the old elephants told the bull elephants, "These rhinos are not our competitors, you don't have to kill them." So there is some wisdom in old people that has to be preserved. So now the conclusion is that if you want to cull, you have to cull over a curve. And you don't have the heart to kill young people, so you don't cull at all. So you have to find other spaces where you can locate them. And that is an independent solution. But the point is that there is a mix. There is experience that's valuable, but on the other hand, you have to take it with a pinch of salt, because your circumstances are different and you have to question it. But if you do think, then I think you will arrive at the right thing. Don't have preconceived notions about what you ought to be doing. If you think with clarity, in fact, that song was beautiful today. She sang about Vinayaka, and she said, "Without doubt in my heart and with no dark spots in my brain, please let me think." And she said, "I ask favors and you give me." But she asked for a favor to be 100 years old. I think that's a bit long. But in any case, I think the point to be made really is that I think we are very happy that such innovations occur. And innovation has to have an economic result. It has to have an economic consequence. He's been very successful with the previous product. I hope he's very successful with this product also. And good innovation also has to have, it has to create a win-win situation. So if many of the users of the product also find it beneficial, then I think it's going to be doubly successful. So let me wish Balaraju all the very best, and Priyadarshini also. And I think this is a good combination of psychology, management, and engineering, which you did some time ago, although you don't acknowledge too much. Incidentally, he doesn't mention chemical engineering as a career. But I think the important thing is that you should think. And incidentally, Bertrand Russell, he said, he's a famous statement, he said, "Most people would rather die than think." And then he added, "Most do." So please don't, please think for yourselves and ask if it's right. And also make sure you answer the questions honestly. It's not about, you shouldn't have preconceived values about this is the right answer, this is the cool thing, or this is how I chill out, within quotes. Sorry, I may be misusing those words. You're the right generation for using those words. But I think the idea is to do it honestly and then compare the feedback. By and large, that's why you do large numbers, because by and large people are honest, so you will get good results. But I want to wish all of you the very best. I wish Balraju and Priya all the best. And thanks, Ganesh.